Herzog is a 1964 novel by Saul Bellow. Uh, Herzog is on the end of his second marriage. It's broken up. He took his second wife, Madeline, into the countryside to work on his great project. A new angle on the modern condition, showing how life could be lived by renewing universal connections, overturning the last of the romantic errors about the uniqueness of self, revising the old Western Faustian ideology, investigating the social meaning of nothingness, and more. Uh, what happens? Madeline leaves him for his best friend, Valentine Gernsback, and yes, this novel is the marriage is done and dusted. He's got a child from both his marriage to Madeline, Julie, and his a son from his first marriage to Daisy. He's also got another mistress, a Ramona, and there's a Sona. There's many women in his life, and indeed, as he is venting and all angry about stuff. The good thing about this novel is it very much, while it's all from Moses E. Herzog's point of view. You get plenty of other viewpoints where you get people like a friend of both him and Madeline, Zelda, says Madeline's issues were like, yeah, you were reckless with other women before all this stuff happened. It's like he is a serial philanderer. He is always on another woman. And indeed, so this book is 5 days of him basically having sort of basically a mental breakdown. He is an earnest man who is also acts like a wild man, who acts like someone. He's very earnest, very. He's like, he's got all this academic ideological stuff, ideas, emotions, kind of ideals. But he's also somebody who cheats on people. And indeed, like, he talks about Ramona, and she's this florist businesswoman who, yes, it turned out was one of his students. And of course he had on principle, he's got stuff like, oh, don't sleep with students. But in reality, he's got all these principles, but he acts like a wild man in that sort of a sense. And so this is 5 days of him basically losing the clue. He's continually writing. There's scenes at the beginning where he's teaching a class where he pauses in the middle of it to write letters to people, and he's either writing letters, like physically actually writing the letters, or he's writing them in his head. And you can tell this is all stuff that he's just writing that is never getting sent out anywhere. And indeed, these are letters to friends and family, but it's also to like Eisenhower and Nietzsche and Heigard and Hildegard, and to his psychiatrist, Dr. Edvig, to Ramona, his mistress, or Sono, another mistress, a woman who he actually tellingly didn't have. I think they talked a bit of French to each other, but it was like actually a lot less of a language thing. And it's one of the few relationships you think, oh, this is one where actually I think he was getting used as much as the women were getting used, and he was, there's very much this thing of he is using them, he is projecting all this stuff into them. And indeed, especially at the beginning of this book and working the way through, he's got all this rage and anger directed towards Madeline, where when you're reading between the lines, it's like, yeah, Madeline seems to have had a lot of reasons to say, yeah, screw it, I'm going off with this guy, and to want to get free of this guy that he was in. It's one of these books where you hear the secondary characters get little notes over here, and you kind of latch onto them, like, oh, maybe this is actually what's happening, that this guy is Herzog, who portrays himself as the victim, is actually a tyrant and stuff like that. And at the beginning of this novel, he is just spewing out all these letters. But the great thing about this book, because there's not really that much of a plot, really, he travels up to, I think it's Martha Vineyards, and then just realizes, oh, this isn't what I do, and he comes back. He kind of stalks his ex-wife's place. Like, he's like, oh, he picks up a gun. What do you think? Oh, is he going to actually shoot anyone with it? And he gets into a car crash, he ends up in the police station, and he gets bailed out. These are all plot things which does not capture. You're going on this inward mental journey of this fellow, of him going through both kind of just sort of his own personal history, the kind of a whole kind of just his academic life. This is very much a book. It's like he's a failed academic, and his this thing of renewing universal connections. A part of this book is about indeed renewing universal connections. And him having all these very seductive and like kind of lofty, like amazing kind of things of like how we should live our lives, and then you watch how this guy is living his life. It's I think it's always one of these wonderful things of, if you're going to have somebody who's a prophet, who's going to tell you all these glorious things, you should also get to see that they sleep around and they're a dick in their real life, and they don't actually follow their own precepts. I think it's that wonderful contradiction. I think someone, they talk about something like John Lennon being all about give peace a chance and all that stuff, but was actually sounded like he was quite a nasty, violent guy in his actual life. But him also saying, oh, that's why I've latched onto this, is because myself being such an angry, violent guy, I need to actually, I need to weld with this peace. I need to grasp with this. I need to project out peace. And it's funny. Peace is a word that really comes up at the end of this novel. I don't know at the end of the day whether Herzog actually does. It's one of these things of a cycle, because his brother bails him out of prison, and he ends up kind of hooking up with Ramona again at the end. I don't think this is anything. I don't think I can spoil this book. This is an experience. This is a book of you're traveling through this guy's mind. And I do wonder at the very end of the day how far Herzog has got. He does talk about how at the beginning of the book he had trouble living with ambiguity, of the thing of, he is this guy with all these kind of ideals and peace and stuff, but he's also full of rage and needs women, and obviously a lot of like id and libido in there. He talks about like, it's my job to kind of try and convince the people in power not to destroy the world. And there's a part of him in there that is totally about burning down the world, which he's struggling against. But he seems to find a way of trying to he seems to be getting to a point of kind of like being able to live with that ambiguity, and also recognizing that maybe one of the reasons why he really didn't get along with someone like Madeline was that she was someone whose disorder is super clarity. And indeed, when she looks at him at the end of this book, oh boy, he just shrinks down to like nothing. But he doesn't allow that to actually consume him, which is a good thing. However, at the end of this book, you get the sense that, oh, he's going to hook up with this new woman, and the cycle is going to begin again. And I think that's maybe a perfect thing of like, you're like, oh, he's about to kind of embark on yet another doomed relationship with another woman, because it's hard not to see ourselves in the people around us. I mean, maybe that's the only way we can see ourselves, but to try not to do that in a self-destructive way. So yeah, this was a really, it's not that big of a book, but it's a really big book, So, it's not going to be for everybody. It reminds me a lot of Henry Miller, though I think Henry Miller was a lot more romantic about his own, I'm with lots of women sort of thing, where this book is, he's a fool. He is a wild man and an earnest man, but you get much more of a self-critical thing there. So yeah, it's a challenging book. It's not something for someone who wants plot. It's a very masculine book. Herzog is sort of in his late 40s, which feels older than that, because I guess I have to say that because I'm in my late 40s. But just as you coming to that part of your life and having to deal with all the kind of the accumulated gunk in your life, that when you start off young, you've got all this idealism, but you don't have the kind of the personal history and all the personal complications and all the failings and all the ways that you've completely not lived up to all that. Whereas this is a book about wrestling with all that, about kind of coming to some kind of acceptance about that, which I found quite quite good. And this is, yes, Saul Bellow. I will have to probably go through this again. It's a library book, but it's one of those lovely black spine Penguin classics. So I don't think I'm going to make my own Penguin classic wall, but maybe this is one that I would find for myself and try it and reread, because yeah, there's a lot in here, and there's a lot of the intellectual stuff that I just sort of had to let it swoop by me. It was amazing stuff, but yeah, it's quite the book. All right, more videos later.